clash of empires. Now, if one were to look at the world around the year 600, at least the old world, Europe, Asia, you would notice a few major empires, many smaller states. There, on the western end, is the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. It stretches from the Atlantic in southern Spain and northern Morocco through almost to the Caspian Sea in the east. It's not as large as it once was, but it still dominates the Mediterranean world. Elsewhere on the far end is China, the Sui Empire, maybe not quite as large as the Han Empire, but again, significant empire. Between them, one would see the Persian Empire, the Sassanid dynasty, and the Khanates of the Gulf Turks. Between these few powers, much of the world is dominated. This is a map of the world that will be irrevocably shattered within a few decades. Now, for the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, the greatest rival was that of the Persian Sasanian Empire. This empire had been established in 224 by Ardashir I. Ardashir, the son of Sasan, came from a family from Pars or Fars in southern Iran. They were priests, magi, of Zoroastrian religion. And under Ardashir, the Persian armies replaced the Parthian power, which had been this real rival to Rome for the previous 300 years. And they began to expand farther. Now, the Sasanian Empire was based fundamentally on the power of the Iranian nobles. The Iranian nobles were highly militarized and allowed them to raise an army quickly that could fight on multiple fronts. The state the Sasanians ruled was the first state that had an official religion, Zoroastrianism. The priests, the Magi, Zoroastrianism were intensely powerful. However, Zoroastrianism had a problem. One needed to be an Iranian to become a Zoroastrian. And once they had replaced Parthia, Mesopotamia had fallen into their empire, as well as parts of Arabia, the Indus Valley, Central Asia, bringing many non-Iranians into the empire. One of the ways that they looked at dealing with this challenge was by the consideration Shapur I gave to a new religion, Manichaeanism, begun by the prophet Mani in Iraq under the Sasanians. However, that did not gain full official support, and Prophet Mani was killed by Shapur's successor, Bahram. Both Manichaeanism and Christianity spread through the entirety of the Persian Empire, but neither became the official faith. Judaism was heavily favored once Christianity was established in the Roman, because many Jews, probably rightly, saw Christians as hostile to them, and Christians saw Jews as hostile to them. And as a result, the Zoroastrians saw Jews as potential allies. Now, Persia, from its restoration under Sasanian power, rapidly became the major military threat to Rome, and would remain so throughout the rest of the Sasanian history. The wars they fought were what triggered the 3rd century crisis. Just looking at the length of these wars gives you some idea of how deep the conflicts were. 230 to 232, 238 to 271, 283 to 285, 296 to 299. Then there's a break. The 4th century saw only 2 short wars, one of a mere 14 years, the other when Julian invaded, which brought peace, only interrupted by very brief wars during the 5th century. 2 Roman emperors, Valerian in the 3rd century and Julian in the 4th, fell fighting the Persians. The 6th century, however, saw an almost constant conflict between the 2 empires, 502 to 506, and then under Justinian from 526 to 532, 539 to 545, 548 to 562, and finally from 572 to 591. Almost constant war. And the wars, as they went on, became increasingly destructive. In that last war, we hear of huge numbers of prisoners, numbering into the hundreds of thousands, taken by each side as captives and transported back to their own territory. We hear of entire cities razed by each when they occupied the other's territory. This constant state of war also meant that there was conflict away from the main border area. The primary border area between the Sasanians and the Byzantines ran roughly along the modern Syrian-Iraqi border and then northwards into eastern Turkey. North of there, the states of Armenia, Caucasian Albania, and so on would also see these conflicts fought out, as well as in the Arabian Peninsula and in East Africa. These proxy wars, that is, where conflicts between the Persians and Romans were carried out, would bring significant change, possibly, arguably, to the whole world. A proxy war, of course, is where each side is sponsored by some more powerful group rather than those two fighting each other directly. In more recent times, during the Cold War, there are many proxy wars between the Americans and the Russians without Russian or American soldiers shooting at each other directly. And the same sort of thing would be going on between the Persians and the Byzantines. Much of this conflict would be carried out in Arabia. The northern Arab tribes at this point are divided into 2 large confederacies. The Ghassanids, or Abu Ghassan, who were based in southern Syria, closely allied to the Romans, and controlled much of what is today Jordan and the desert side of Syria. The city of Petra was within their domain. The Lachmids, on the other hand, were a confederacy that was tied to the Persian Empire, primarily south of the Euphrates in Iraq, going down into Kuwait. Both of them would supply soldiers to fight alongside the regular armies of their sponsors. Both of them are Christian, which is fairly significant later on. Further south, there are other kingdoms that were perhaps less closely tied to either of the empires. Christianity has been spreading by the late 6th century throughout the world. And as states became Christian, they tended to come into alliance with the Byzantine Empire and saw the emperor of Constantinople as the ultimate living Christian political leader. One of the most powerful of the Christian states outside of the empire was Aksum, based in what's now Eritrea and Ethiopia. Aksum had been a Roman ally and since it became Christian in 325 under its king Etsana. This is a monument at Sana raised in their capital. Sana had also conquered Nubia, though latterly, though Nubia had become independent once more, but was now Christian and made up of small kingdoms, friendly to the Romans. Now, in southern Arabia, there was conflict. On one side, the Persians, the other side, the Romans, the third side, the Axumites, and the Arab kingdoms of the north. One of the southern kingdoms, Najran, had become Christian fairly early in the 4th century. Najran became allied with Rome and Aksum, the other major Christian powers around the Red Sea. To its south, the kingdom of Himyar, what's now Yemen. Najran is in the southern part of what's now Saudi Arabia. Himyar is largely Jewish and had forged an alliance with the Persians. Zu-Nuwas, the ruler of Himyar, practicing Judaism, conquered Najran, and when he did so, he set out to eliminate the Christian population. One of the largest slaughters of people for Christianity in world history. Christians fled northwards to the Roman Empire, southwards to Ethiopia, and with Roman support, army led by a general named Abraha crossed the Red Sea, invading southern Arabia. With his elephants, Abraha crushed Himyar and turned it into a province. He advanced as far northwards as the outskirts of Mecca and probably would have conquered all Arabia had the Persians not directly intervened and driven the Ethiopians back out of Arabia. From this point, 578, there are Persian garrisons in both Yemen and Oman, and there is direct Persian support for Jewish communities throughout the peninsula. Meanwhile, there is direct Roman and Axumite support for Christians throughout the peninsula. That will be significant very, very soon. Now, because the Byzantines are heavily involved in fighting with the Persians, they have less ability to deal with the Slavs in the Balkans and the Lombards in Italy. Losing much territory in those areas whilst their armies are away fighting the Persians in the next to last Persian-Byzantine War. But that war ends, and ends in a way that seems like it is the dawning of a new era for the world. In Persia, the coup brought down the rule of the Emperor Khosrau II, and he, along with his Christian wife, a woman named Shireen, fled from their empire, crossing the border into that territory of the Romans and approaching the city of Raqqa in eastern Syria. There, they went to the church, the chief bishop, and asked for sanctuary. When the bishop realized who it was who had come to him, he immediately sent word to the Roman Emperor, Maurice. Maurice hurried to the eastern frontier. Persian Emperor on Roman territory just being so incredible. And Maurice and Khosrau worked out a deal. Maurice loaned Khosrau a Roman army, which he took and restored his power on the throne, defeating his rivals and reestablishing his family on the throne. In return, peace was made between the two empires. Khosrau handed over most of the disputed territory to the Romans, while the two emperors swore a public oath to defend each other and the sons of each other as though they were their own, against any enemy, internal or external. The massive peace meant both states could remove many of the military forces that they had lined up against each other. This immediately would change things for the Romans and significantly for the world. Peace in the east meant Maurice could remove his army, take it to the Balkans, to regain all the territory lost to the Slavs and the Avars. And the campaign starts with great success. They push north, and after 10 years fighting, they have crossed the Danube for the first time in almost 300 years, regaining all the territory, it seems, that Rome had lost to the barbarians. Because they've come so far from Constantinople, the Roman army plans to spend its winter north of the frontier, north of the river, in what's now Romania. The soldiers in that army are not happy. Many of them had wives, girlfriends, families, lovers, whatever, in Constantinople, and were looking forward to going home for the winter. They begin to grumble. And one of the officers, fairly junior officer, named Phocas, becomes the leader of the rebellion. He goes to argue with the general. He kills his general rather than being punished for insubordination, and he declares himself to be emperor. With this army behind him, they march back to Constantinople. At the gates of the city, they are allowed in because, of course, the city garrison is familiar with them. And while thinking that they were going to stay away that winter, they're not shocked to see them come back. Phocas and his troops move on across the city to the palace, where he confronts Maurice, kills him, and becomes, in the end of 602, Byzantine emperor. Now, Phocas claimed that he had killed the entire family of Maurice. Maurice's oldest son may or may not have fled eastwards. Certainly, someone claiming to be Maurice's son, Theodosius, reached the Persian Empire, demanded to see Khosrau himself, and told Khosrau who he was, reminded Khosrau of the promise he had made to his father, and asked Khosrau to restore him to his throne. Persian invasion begins in 603. It is relatively minor, but there is now civil war within the Byzantine Empire. In the western part of the empire, Carthage, the overall ruler for the Roman government is a man named Heraclius the Elder. He had been a close personal friend of Maurice, and Maurice had sent him to be both civilian governor of North Africa and commander of all the military forces in Africa. Heraclius the Elder takes his time figuring out what to do next. And in 608, he organizes a revolt. The African fleet will set sail for Constantinople with a holy war as their message. Before they sail, they have a service of prayer. They dedicate their ships and their weapons to fighting for the Christian faith. They recognize their leader as Heraclius the Younger, son of Heraclius the Elder, who is now emperor. This is the first time in Christian history of the declaration of a holy war, which is, again, very interesting. Heraclius the Younger, as emperor, sails for Constantinople. His cousin Nicetas marches overland with the army of Africa to capture Egypt. They both succeed. When Heraclius reaches Constantinople, he quickly defeats Phocas and has him executed, taking power in the city as overall ruler of the emperor. Now we would think this is the end of the problems, but not so fast. By the time Heraclius is fully in power in Constantinople, the Persians have broken the frontier forces, the empire in Syria in 611. With nothing to stop them, they capture major cities. In 613, they capture Antioch, the largest of the Syrian cities, and begin moving southward. In 614, they captured the city of Jerusalem. The Persians, who have in their army a large number of Jewish soldiers, turn the city of Jerusalem over to Jewish control for the first time since 70 AD. And the new Jewish rulers begin by first massacring 24,000 Christians and then proceed to begin rebuilding the temple. Meanwhile, the Persians have continued to advance. In 616, just 2 years later, they capture Alexandria and all of Egypt. This is the first time Egypt has been invaded since the death of Cleopatra. Meanwhile, the Persian army advances to within sight of Constantinople. It looks like the end for the Romans. Meanwhile, in the West, the Avars have regained themselves and have pushed towards Constantinople too, regaining the territory they had lost during Maurice's campaign. And now, on one side of Constantinople are the Avars, on the other side are the Persians. It seems like the city itself will fall. It would take a miracle to survive this, and perhaps it did. Heraclius takes his navy and decides, rather than fighting the Persians directly, he sails as far east as he can, the Black Sea, lands an army far behind Persian lines, marches across the very high mountains of western Iran and eastern Turkey, attacking Persia itself, burning Persian cities, and battling Khusrau and the Persian army outside the ruins of Nineveh. The battle is quite spectacular. At the beginning of the battle, Persian champion comes out challenging the Romans for a one-on-one fight. Heraclius himself goes forward and kills the Persian champion Rhazates before the assembled armies. His soldiers take heart and they destroy the Persian army at Nineveh and then march south to the Persian capital Ctesiphon, capture Khusrau's palace. They return home with all the treasures of the Persian palace, including a wagon full of sweet salt, something previously unknown in the Byzantine Empire. It is considered more valuable than gold. What it is sugar. Now, Peace follows. Khusrau demands total peace, or requests total peace. He gives everything back. All Persian armies are to withdraw immediately from Egypt, Syria, Palestine, Jerusalem, and go home. The treasures of Jerusalem, including the true cross, are handed over to Heraclius, and the Persian Empire is in deep, deep, deep trouble. Khosrau himself will be overthrown. There will be a series of emperors in very, very short succession in Persia. A Christian emperor, a woman emperor, I think about 15 in the next 10 years. Heraclius will take the true cross and carry it to Jerusalem. There's some interesting stories told about his time in Jerusalem. But now that he has defeated the great enemy and restored the lost lands to the empire, he decides that he will solve the problems that had plagued the empire and this issue. And the biggest problem he saw was the religious disunity between Monophysites, Nestorians, and Chalcedonians. So he comes up with a new formula about the natures of Christ called monergism, saying that regardless of how many natures, we don't need to worry about his natures. God the Son has only one active will, and we can all agree on that. The Church of the East, the Nestorians in the Persian Empire, the Monophysites in Egypt and Armenia, and the Chalcedonian Church in Constantinople, in Alexandria and Antioch, all come together. Looks like all peace will be restored. There will be a single Christian church throughout the world for the first time. Iran looks like it is about to become Christian. However, Church of Rome and Jerusalem step back, and slowly other churches make arguments against his position, including Maximus the Confessor from Carthage, the Pope in Rome, and Sophronius in Jerusalem. So they come up with a slightly better improvement, saying that the Son has one will, called monothelitism. All of these are hair-splitting differences. And Jerusalem comes on board. Only Rome is left. And Heraclius then does something else. Not only has he established Christian unity, says there's another religious problem his empire faces. And on May 31st, 632, he issues orders that all Jews within the empire are to be baptized and become Christians or be killed. He sends letters to the rulers in Italy, France, and Spain. King of the Franks agrees, Dagobert, either baptizing or killing all Jews in the Frankish kingdoms. Same seems to have happened in Italy. In Spain, the church there writes back saying that we know there will always be a large Jewish community until the last days of the world and the reign of the last emperor. Since the world is not ending, we are not going to force people to be Christians against their will. Thank you very much. Which raises the question, did Heraclius think it was the end of the world? Certainly, it's a time where the world is about to go through a major transformation.